Imagine going to your doctor, getting your annual blood work back, and being told that everything looks perfectly normal.
Right.
You leave feeling great, totally unaware that beneath those so-called normal numbers, your body is quietly masking this massive metabolic crisis.
Which happens so often.
You're
Yeah.
right. And it's one that is actively shaving, I think it was 100 days off your lifespan. For every single year, it goes undetected.
It's terrifying.
It really is. And that invisible crisis is just one of the things we are tackling today as we dive into this source document we have. It's simply titled longevity-tips.md. And what makes this material so compelling to me is that it completely ignores the noisy health fad.
Yeah, the superficial biohacking trends.
Exactly. It skips all that, and instead it offers the synthesis of high-signal, non-obvious strategies from some of the world's leading longevity researchers and clinicians. So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out how to actually optimize long-term health span and short-term vitality, but without feeling like you need to take on a second career just to stay healthy.
Because nobody has time for that.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this, because if we start looking at this material not as a punishing list of daily chores, but as an actual owner's manual for human biology, the whole paradigm shifts.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that these protocols actively target the cellular and molecular hallmarks of aging.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we aren't discussing superficial fixes. The sources dig into the actual mechanics of how our bodies deteriorate, and they map out how we can intervene at a foundational biological level to change that trajectory.
Right. But before we even touch the advanced longevity interventions, the notes make it really clear that we have to start with the raw materials.
Yeah, the baseline.
Yeah. We have to look at what we are feeding the machine and the hormonal signals those materials create. And building that metabolic baseline starts with tip 1, which comes from Dr. Alexandra Soa. She's an obesity medicine specialist. And she lays out this clinical standard of consuming 30 grams of high-quality protein 3 times a day.
Right.
And she is incredibly firm about starting right at breakfast to basically wake up the metabolism.
And that 30-gram threshold, it's not just a random number. It's a highly specific biological trigger.
Okay.
Because as we age, our bodies develop this condition called anabolic resistance.
Which means what?
So to put it simply,
Yeah.
our muscle tissue becomes stubborn. It starts ignoring the chemical signals that normally tell it to grow and repair itself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if someone is trying to lose weight or they're just eating a standard diet, the body naturally tends to shed both fat and metabolically precious skeletal muscle.
Which is the exact opposite of what you want.
Exactly. But hitting that 30-gram mark of high-quality protein, whether that's from fish, eggs, lean meats, or a clean powder, it provides enough of the amino acid leucine to overpower that resistance.
I see.
It actively forces the body to initiate muscle protein synthesis, preserving the tissue that basically keeps our metabolism running hot.
And the document also highlights this phenomenal secondary benefit to this, which is the thermic effect of protein.
Oh, yeah. This is great.
Because we are so used to thinking a calorie is just a calorie, right? But protein actually bends the rules of thermodynamics in our favor.
It really does.
The human body has to spend a massive amount of energy just to break down and digest it. So instead of a gram of protein hitting your system as the standard 4 calories, the net caloric impact drops to about 2 to 2.5 calories per gram.
Right.
Which is wild. You are essentially getting a metabolic discount at the checkout counter just for processing your food.
Yeah, and preserving that muscle mass while taking advantage of the thermic effect maintains a high basal metabolic rate. That is your primary defense against midlife obesity, chronic physical pain, and systemic autoimmunity. But, Dr. Soa also makes a point to reframe how we view metabolic dysfunction itself.
Right.
It is rarely just a simple mathematical equation of calories in versus calories out.
Yeah, and she illustrates that beautifully using the story of the public figure Rosie O'Donnell. So O'Donnell utilized a GLP-1 medication and spoke really openly about how her lifelong struggle with obesity actually began in childhood, like right after the death of her mother.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Her father was completely overwhelmed with grief, and he would just hand the kids money for groceries. And that led them to naturally stock up on highly processed, comfort-based carbohydrates to cope.
Which makes total sense.
Right. And Dr. Soa uses this to demonstrate that metabolic dysfunction is a deeply complex biological and emotional disorder. It's often rooted in trauma. It is absolutely not a moral failure or just a simple lack of willpower.
Yeah, that compassionate framing is so important. And it sets the stage for the next layer of metabolic health, which focuses on the work of pediatric endocrinologist Dr. Robert Lustig.
Right.
His primary objective is lowering systemic insulin to overcome something called leptin resistance. The protocol recommends shifting to a low-sugar, high-fiber, plant-forward diet. But the crucial diagnostic advice he gives is to work with your doctor to track your fasting insulin levels, not just your fasting blood glucose.
And the mechanism behind this leptin resistance is wild to me. So leptin is a hormone produced by our fat cells, right? And its entire job is to act like a fuel gauge.
Yes.
It tells the brain, hey, we have enough energy stored up, we are not starving. But chronically high insulin physically blocks that leptin signal from reaching the brain.
It just severs the connection.
Yeah. To me, it is exactly like a broken fuel gauge in a car. Imagine your gas tank is completely full, but the dashboard is flashing empty.
Right.
Your brain frantically commands you to keep pulling over to eat because it genuinely believes on a biological level that you are running out of gas.
Yeah.
It triggers chronic overeating and simultaneously commands your body to conserve energy, making you feel terribly fatigued.
And clinical nurse practitioner Cynthia Thurlow shared this really powerful anecdote in the sources that illustrates this exact broken fuel gauge.
Oh, the restaurant story.
Yeah. She was at a restaurant with her kids and observed a morbidly obese diner who was just continuously eating massive portions of food. And instead of judging, she used it as a teaching moment for her children about hormonal communication breakdown.
Which is such a better way to look at it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She explained that the diner's brain was literally starving, desperately crying out for nutrients because high insulin had severed the leptin signal.
Wow.
Lowering insulin is the only way to clear that blockage and restore the brain's ability to read the fuel gauge accurately. And, adding high dietary fiber slows sugar absorption while feeding the gut microbiome, which then produces short-chain fatty acids that suppress the resulting inflammation.
Right. And that brings us back to that hidden crisis I mentioned at the very start.
Yes.
The notes reveal that insulin resistance can remain completely hidden on standard blood tests for anywhere from 6 to 14 years.
There's a huge window.
A huge window. A person's annual fasting blood sugar and HbA1c can look flawless on paper, but that is merely an illusion. The pancreas is just working overtime, pumping out massive amounts of insulin to temporarily mask the dysfunction and keep the blood sugar numbers looking normal.
And if a person lets that silent progression continue until their HbA1c reaches 7.5%, the data estimates they lose 100 days of their lifespan for every single year it stays at that level.
100 days a year.
It's massive.
Mm-hmm.
That high blood sugar depletes nitric oxide, drives hypertension, and lays the groundwork for major chronic diseases.
Right.
And the damage doesn't stay confined to the cardiovascular system either. When the metabolic fuel gauge is broken, and systemic inflammation rises, those inflammatory signals actually cross the blood-brain barrier.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they physically alter the brain's immune system, which introduces this whole concept of immunometabolism.
Okay, so the brain operates its own specialized immune force, right? Made up of these cells called microglia. And board-certified neurologist Dr. David Perlmutter's research outlines how these microglia shift between two very distinct configurations. The M2 state is the supportive, nurturing mode. These are the brain's defenders, clearing out waste and supporting neural connections.
Right.
But then there's the M1 state, which acts like an evil twin. It is highly destructive and neuroinflammatory.
And the metabolism of those microglial cells directly mirrors the metabolism of your entire body. So when fasting insulin or visceral fat inflammation rises, the tiny power plants, the mitochondria inside those microglial cells, begin to fail.
Okay.
They can no longer use oxygen to produce energy efficiently, so they are forced to switch to an incredibly inefficient backup system called glycolysis.
And the math on that energy failure is just staggering to me. Normally, a healthy cell uses oxygen and gets 32 molecules of cellular energy, called ATP, from a single unit of glucose.
Right.
But when a microglial cell chokes and is forced into glycolysis, it only yields 2 ATP.
From 32 down to 2.
It is starving for power. That severe energy deficit locks the microglia into that evil twin M1 state. They panic. They actively start destroying healthy synapses, releasing free radicals, and driving the exact neuroinflammation that underpins Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and major depression.
But the incredibly hopeful aspect of this research is that the damage is largely reversible.
Yes.
The document details the Tansy Ornish clinical trial, which was conducted by Dr. Rudolph Tanzi at Harvard and Dr. Dean Ornish. They took 57 patients diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's and put them on an intensive 20-week protocol involving diet, regular exercise, stress reduction, and social connection.
And no drugs, right.
Exactly. They didn't use any pharmaceuticals.
And the results from just those lifestyle changes were profound. In 70% of that cohort, cognitive decline was completely arrested, and many patients even demonstrated measurable cognitive improvement.
Yeah.
And there is an even more extreme case study in the notes from Dr. Perlmutter and functional medicine pioneer Dr. Mark Hyman.
Oh.
They treated a patient suffering from severe dementia, heavy metal toxicity, and gut dysbiosis by utilizing a therapeutic ketogenic diet. And because ketones provide an alternative fuel source that completely bypasses the broken insulin receptors, the ketones directly fed the brain's starving mitochondria.
Yeah.
It was as if this patient literally woke up and reclaimed her cognitive function. Getting the microglia out of glycolysis and back to that M2 state stops the destruction.
It does. And reverting those cells also requires utilizing the ultimate brain repair tool, which is sleep.
Sleep.
Yeah. The protocol stresses getting 7 to 8 hours of restorative sleep, monitoring deep sleep phases, limiting afternoon caffeine, and keeping the bedroom cold, dark, and well ventilated.
Right.
And the biological mechanism driving this recommendation is the glymphatic system. During deep sleep, the interstitial space in the brain actually expands, and brain pulsations physically wash toxic cellular debris, like beta amyloid, out into the bloodstream to be eliminated.
Wow.
It is a mandatory nightly wash cycle for your neural circuitry.
Okay, but let's be realistic for a moment. So what does this all mean for the busy listener? The protocol says 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But for anyone with a demanding job, a stressful commute, or young kids, a bad night of sleep is just a standard Tuesday.
Yeah.
Is missing one single night of sleep really causing that much measurable biological damage, or is that just clinical hyperbole?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, a bad night of sleep goes far beyond just feeling a bit groggy during a morning meeting.
Okay.
Deep sleep is the mechanism that calms the amygdala, which is the brain's primary threat detection center. A single night of poor or non-restorative sleep leaves that amygdala hyperactive and panicked.
Like it's constantly on edge.
Exactly. That panic immediately spikes systemic inflammatory alarm signals, which are called cytokines. It decreases your insulin sensitivity, and it completely hijacks the brain's impulse control centers.
Right.
Clinical meta-analyses reveal that one night of sleep deprivation increases the next day's food intake by an average of 400 additional calories.
400 calories just from being tired.
Yeah. And because the brain is desperate for quick energy, those cravings are heavily skewed toward inflammatory, sugary, processed foods.
And that perfectly explains a hilarious but terrifying anecdote from Dr. Mark Hyman in the source document.
Oh, the baby food story.
Yes. He talks about his days as an ER resident working these grueling back-to-back all-night shifts. His sleep-deprived brain would trigger sugar cravings so intense that he would literally sneak into the hospital's pediatrics ward just to eat pure sugar banana beech nut baby food.
Oh my gosh.
He needed it just to stay awake. And I mean, if a highly educated medical doctor is being biologically driven to raid the infant food supply because his amygdala is panicking, it proves how overpowering these survival drives really are.
It really does. Protecting that nightly glymphatic wash cycle and preventing those overnight cortisol spikes is non-negotiable if we want to shield the brain's mitochondria and keep those microglia operating as defenders rather than destroyers.
So once we have cleared out the cellular debris and repaired the metabolic fuel gauge, how do we actively build up the body's defenses? The longevity researchers point to introducing controlled adversity. We have to purposefully flip the survival switch. The source document outlines the dual power exercise protocol, which is 180 minutes a week, divided between moderate to vigorous aerobic training like brisk walking, cycling, or racket sports, and progressive resistance training like squats and deadlifts.
Yeah.
It also includes a firm warning against chronic overtraining, capping exercise at 10 hours a week, because going beyond that chronically elevates cortisol and cancels out the longevity benefits.
And the core biological concept at play here comes from Dr. David Sinclair, a geneticist at Harvard Medical School, and it is called hormesis.
Hormesis, okay.
Yes. This is the practice of moving the body out of a lazy, resting state and introducing a transient, highly controlled stressor.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Hormesis is essentially a biological fire drill.
Yes,
By
exactly.
stressing the system through exercise, You shift the body out of this comfortable abundance mode where it just wants to sit around, grow, and store fat. You snap it into adversity mode.
Yeah.
You are forcing your cells to practice their emergency protocols so they stay incredibly sharp, resilient, and ready to defend the body when a real threat-like disease or a cellular mutation actually arrives.
And that biological fire drill forces the body to deploy its cellular first responders. We're talking about ancient survival circuits like AMP kinase, an enzyme that stops the body from storing fat and forces it to burn stored energy.
Okay.
Then you have the sirtuins, specifically a protein called SRT1, which acts like a cellular mechanic. It rushes in to repair damaged DNA and suppress chronic inflammation.
Wow.
Yeah. These first responders also upregulate a pathway called PGC1 alpha, which commands the cells to build brand new, highly efficient mitochondria. So you're essentially upgrading the body's power plants.
That's incredible.
Furthermore, there's a fascinating communication network between our muscles and our brain. When skeletal muscles contract under resistance, they act like endocrine glands, secreting specialized proteins called myokines.
And the standout myokine mentioned in the text is irisin. And what is amazing is that irisin actually crosses the blood-brain barrier and triggers the release of BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It is essentially Miracle-Gro for the brain.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it repairs the blood-brain barrier, it locks the microglia in their protective M2 state, and it drives neurogenesis, which is the actual growth of new brain cells in the hippocampus.
Right.
The impact of this fire drill on human longevity is staggering. The Copenhagen City Heart Study tracked 8,500 adults over 25 years and discovered that playing racket sports, specifically tennis, was linked to a 9.7-year increase in life expectancy.
Adding nearly a decade of life is an incredible return on investment.
Right.
Another metric highlighted in the research is VO2 max, which measures how efficiently your body utilizes oxygen during peak exertion. A massive treadmill study published in JAMA following 120,000 people demonstrated that cardiorespiratory fitness is the single strongest predictor of human survival. Yeah. Individuals in the lowest fitness percentiles face a 4- to 5-fold higher risk of death compared to those in the highest percentiles. To put that in perspective, poor cardiovascular fitness is a more severe mortality risk than smoking cigarettes or having diabetes.
That is just wild to think about, and functional muscle strength is just as critical, right? The notes indicate that muscle power declines by 2 to 4% every single year after age 40, which eventually leads to catastrophic life-ending falls in older adults.
Yeah.
They suggest using the sitting rising test, or SRT, as a brilliant metric for musculoskeletal health. You sit cross-legged on the floor and try to stand back up without using your hands, knees, or arms for support.
It's harder than it sounds.
Oh, it is. Every 1-point improvement on the SRT scoring system is linked to a 21% reduction in mortality risk. And Dr. Sinclair actually shared a funny off-camera anecdote about this from his lab.
Oh, yeah.
They decided to have a friendly team competition doing the SRT. His chief of staff, Marissa, easily sat on the floor and popped right back up to a full stand without using her hands at all.
Nice.
But the male scientists in the lab, including Sinclair himself, struggled immensely and found the whole ordeal highly embarrassing.
Yeah, that happens.
It perfectly illustrates that biological age and functional fitness rarely match the chronological age printed on your driver's license.
And that realization leads directly into the final and perhaps most profound piece of the protocol, which is epigenetics and the biology of belief. The researchers urge us to mindfully reprogram our biology and actively reject the widespread clinical myth of age-related decay.
Right.
We are conditioned to accept genetic determinism, the idea that our DNA is just this unchangeable destiny.
And the protocol leans heavily on the work of cellular biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton and athletic performance coach Stefan Duvivier. They argue that we have to break free from the ageist clinical framing where every ache, pain, or injury is casually dismissed by doctors as wear and tear or just getting older. Duvivier's data demonstrates that people in their 50s and 60s who cultivate deep interoceptive awareness, a mindful connection to their body's internal signals that he calls listening energy, or ting, can resolve injuries and move with the same fluidity as people in their 20s. The actual rate of tissue healing is heavily dictated by conscious neural intention.
Which is amazing. But this raises an important question. How can a conscious thought actually heal a physical tissue?
Right. How does that work?
The answer lies in understanding that your body is made up of 50 trillion cells, and they are essentially skin-covered culture dishes.
Okay.
Those cells are constantly bathed in the growth medium of your blood, and your brain is the master chemist mixing that medium. Dr. Lipton proved this mechanism back in the 1970s with his pioneering stem cell cloning experiments. He took genetically identical stem cells and separated them into 3 different culture dishes.
Right, and they had the exact same DNA blueprint.
They were identical. But by simply altering the chemical composition of the fluid growth medium in each dish, those identical genes expressed completely different physical traits. Muscle tissue grew in the first dish, bone grew in the second, and fat cells grew in the third.
That's crazy.
It proved definitively that environmental signaling, so the chemistry surrounding the cell, dictates biological expression, not genetic predetermination.
Okay, so if our blood is the growth medium for our 50 trillion cells, and our brain is the chemist mixing that blood based on our perceptions, chronic thoughts of self-doubt, fear, or stressing over the inevitability of getting older literally command the brain to release stress chemistry like cortisol into the bloodstream.
Yeah.
And that cortisol degrades the gut barrier, it harms the microbiome, and it directly prompts the brain's microglia to abandon their protective duties and shift right back into that destructive neuroinflammatory M1 state.
Right. Epigenetics literally translates to control above the genes. It proves that human consciousness is the architect actively editing the DNA blueprints. Accepting ageist expectations of decay creates a massive nocebo effect, which is the dark destructive twin of the nocebo effect.
Wow.
It slows the body's healing mechanisms and actively manifests the exact disease and decay we are so afraid of. Dr. Lipton believed in this so deeply that he walked away from a tenured medical school professorship because he fundamentally could not teach genetic determinism anymore.
Wow.
And when he was diagnosed with cancer at age 80, he utilized his own science, mindfully altering his body's chemical growth medium through belief and consciousness to support his immune system and achieve a full recovery.
Yeah.
Shifting the nervous system out of fight-or-flight panic and into rest, digest, and repair changes the literal chemistry of your blood.
So, if you want to own your biological blueprint, it really all comes down to sending your body the right signals. Feed it 30 grams of protein 3 times a day so it doesn't eat its own muscle. Fix the leptin fuel gauge by keeping insulin low so your brain knows you aren't starving.
Yeah.
Wash the brain's immune system with 7 to 8 hours of deep sleep to clear out all that toxic debris. Run the biological fire drill with 180 minutes of exercise to build new power plants and release brain fertilizer. And finally, reject the victim mentality of genetic determinism.
It is an incredibly empowering framework for the listener. You are not at the mercy of your genes. Through your daily actions, your metabolic choices, and your conscious environment, you are the one pulling the levers of your own biology.
And that leads to one final provocative thought I want to leave everyone with today, kind of combining those last 2 concepts.
Okay.
If our thoughts literally change the chemical composition of our blood, our internal culture dish, and physical exercise acts as a biological fire drill, what happens when we combine them simultaneously?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Could the specific mental intention or empowering belief we hold while we are sweating, lifting, or running actually amplify the cellular production of anti-aging first responders like irisin and SIRT1? Are we just training our muscles, or are we chemically manifesting our own cellular resilience?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, just something to think about the next time you tie up your shoes. Keep diving deep, and we'll see you next time.